Hey everybody, this is Dan with Pain Free You. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Lindsay Vine from Vancouver, Canada. And Lindsay is gracious enough to share her experience in the hopes that it will inspire and maybe even instruct some folks who are going through similar journeys. So, Lindsay, I appreciate you. Thank you for volunteering to share on my channel.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. You have such an amazing impact in this community. I've heard your name all over the place, so it's really cool to meet you.
Thank you. So, the format here is generally casual conversation. Take us on a ride, take us on a journey. When
Sure.
did all this start? What was going on in your life? How long did you stay involved in the medical world? When did you kind of start thinking, well, maybe this is a mind-body thing? And
Yeah,
all those
I
so
know the
long
drill.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so share what's going on.
So it was the end of 2015, so start of 2016 there, and I was just finishing my master's in public health, which was an extremely stressful 2 years for me.
Okay.
I had whiplash at the start of my master's, so the whole 2 years, like crazy neck pain, crazy stress from the master's, because I was constantly in this feeling of not being good enough. Master's in public health, for people who don't know, sometimes doctors, like pre-med students, take it because they want it like to look good on their resumes. Whereas I have a very artsy background. So I felt like I was like competing with these super smart people. And I'm intelligent too, but it wasn't how I was treating myself.
Right.
And there were so many things that happened around that time that I got sick. There was a breakup. I got lice because my roommate was a teacher. And if you can imagine having lice, you're always in this state of, are they still there? Are they still there? You can just imagine how your brain is constantly hypervigilant. I'm
Right.
sure, Dan, you're already seeing the signals of like how this happens. And then I truly handed in my master's thesis. And the next day, whoosh, my body just shut down. Oh, one more thing I'll add is when I was writing my thesis, during my breaks, I was watching Breaking Bad, which is like the most stressful show. Literally, I did not even think to be relaxed during my breaks. It was like, let's take on more stress. But yeah, I handed it in, and the next day, crazy strep throat, which I had had many times during my master's, and antibiotics. They didn't work, more antibiotics. And then it was within that next month that all my energy just drained out of my body. And then it's just what you'd expect. Doctors, so many doctors trying to figure out what was wrong with me because it was just not going away. People saying, "Oh, I always thought of this as like a mental health issue." And I'm like, I don't feel depressed. I just like have no energy whatsoever. Like it's like jet lag mixed with the flu, mixed with a hangover. Like it's so intense. And I was having flu symptoms and
Mhm.
I was having chronic pain. It was just everything. And this intense feeling of heaviness in my neck and in my back. But I kept working. I was working as well. I had to go down to part-time, and finally I had to just stop working. And it was a summer about that time, so I did start to slowly get better. But of course, what do we do when we start to get better? I started looking for jobs right away, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna go, I can work again. It's gonna be fine. And I did have a minute of like, I'm gonna do what I'm passionate about. I'm gonna do what I love. But, I was offered a job in the research department of the Children's Hospital. And even though it wasn't my dream job, it was a good job. So I
Right.
took it. And literally 2 weeks in, bam, crash, all my energy gone again.
Wow.
That's when it really got scary. So that's when I started going to all the specialists and
Right.
naturopaths and internal medicine doctors, and they diagnosed me with ME/CFS.
Right.
And I kept working. I had to go down to part-time. And then I finished that year contract somehow, literally going to bed right after work every day, crying on my breaks. I was so exhausted. And even when I was taking rest breaks, I wasn't really resting. You know that people think they're resting often and it's just stressing
Hmm.
because you're looking the internet. Of course, I'm a researcher, so all of the research was going on.
Yeah.
And then finally I had to stop working after that year contract. I was done. Then what I did, interestingly, is I moved to a small island. I was like, I'm gonna go heal in nature. So off the coast of Vancouver here, we have these islands. I was like,
Okay.
oh, this will be good. I'll go heal in nature. Unfortunately, it was extremely lonely. And what we learn from these illnesses, just something to give you a little pointer, is that your body has to feel safe to heal. And I was like all alone on this island, and then COVID hit, so people couldn't even visit me. And I was just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And it was literally got to the point where I was peeing in a Tupperware beside my bed because I couldn't make it to the bathroom.
Wow.
And I had tuna cans piled up beside my bed because I couldn't cook. So I was just eating from the tuna cans and peeing and then emptying it once a day in the bathroom. That was my one like walk a day was to the bathroom and back. And I was done. I was ready to pull the plug at that point
And this was
until
mostly no energy, or was there
yeah, I
other
had
things going
sinus
on?
infections. I had SIBO, which is um, gastro issues. I had candida, so crazy overgrowth of yeast, a lot of pain in my body that would come and go, headaches, crazy brain fog. Brain fog is so awful because you can't do anything. And as a person who loves to read and watch TV and all these things, I'm alone, but I couldn't do anything.
Wow.
And it was just so debilitating. And I was in the most beautiful place in the world looking over these cliffs. And oh, it was so awful to feel so horrible. And I tried so many things, Dan. I tried fecal transplants. Have you heard of those?
We
So
don't,
you
I know
know
it
how
is. We don't have to talk about it.
we don't have to talk about it. If you know, you know. And I'll tell you, it did nothing. Nothing. I even did it through a doctor. They did it for me
I believe
and
you.
didn't do a thing. I did, what else did I did? I did iron transfusions. Those made me crash so badly.
Were you
Um,
deficient in iron?
I did have low iron, yeah, but it was too much. I tried SSRIs, of course. I tried low dose naltrexone, which I'm still on a low dose of, but I don't think it does much. Maybe a bit for pain. It reacts differently for different people, they've found. So, not a huge difference for me. Um, but at some point, I did find DNRS, which is a brain retraining program. And I did that and I got a little bit better. I did. I did start to get better. And I spent a winter in Thailand and I was like slowly getting better at this like resorty place I stayed in. Came back to the island, had a huge crash again. My body just totally crashed. And for that, I couldn't even touch the brain retraining for about a year after that because it was like it had convinced me that I would be okay and I'd be better in 6 months. And then totally crashed again, back to bed bound. So it was really hard to get myself back back into the recovery mindset. I really feel for people who've seen some progress and then crash back to zero. I get a lot of clients like that
Mhm.
because I understand what that's like. It's really hard to get your brain back
Right.
in that state of mind. But when I really hit that rock bottom with the peeing in the Tupperware and everything, that's when I was like, I need to start asking for help more. Like I asked my stepdad, I had the privilege of asking him to pay for another online program. I did
Mhm.
CFS Health with Toby Morrison. Um, and there I made friends who are also working on recovery. And I think that was one of the biggest pieces of my recovery was
So
doing this with
important.
other people
Yeah, you're
because I
not
was
alone.
really trying to do it on my own. Sorry.
No, I said you're not alone.
Yeah, exactly. Having that community can be such a huge piece.
Yeah.
So I really recommend finding community of people working on the same goals as you. Another big thing, again, very much privileged. My friends had an intervention. They came from Vancouver. they were like, this is not working, Lindsay. And they found me a place in Vancouver. They moved me back to Vancouver. They started bringing me meals. They really took charge to start taking care of me. And they found me such a great place too. So having that feeling of safety is so important in your environment,
Right.
in order to start healing. So it was a bunch of factors that started the healing journey. I
Okay.
do want to add that in that time, so 2 years while I was on that island, in that time, I also suffered a severe concussion. I was at a wedding on another island, similarly, and a car hit us from behind as we were turning. I flew 15 meters out of a spinning car. I have no memories for 12 hours. Like, it is insane that I'm alive,
Right.
truly.
Wow.
But I had such a bad concussion. And it's so interesting after that happened because I couldn't distinguish the difference between concussion symptoms and ME/CFS because they're very similar. But
Okay.
I couldn't read, I couldn't write, I couldn't drive, of course, I couldn't do anything. And I had to very slowly work my brain up from that as well.
Right.
So I had a bit of a double whammy going on at the same time. I call it my 7 years bad luck. It really was insane how much my brain was dealing with. But thank God I found mind body medicine and found a safe environment to heal in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really great. So I came back to Vancouver and I started working very slowly, pacing up. This is something that's kind of interestingly different about just chronic pain that we found is that with chronic fatigue, pacing is a really important piece, this slowly increasing your amount. I like to use the analogy of like stretching pizza dough, is that you stretch it, it's going to recede a little bit, you'll have symptoms. Stretch it, you'll have some symptoms, but by the third or fourth time, it'll hold the new size. And that's kind of what's happening at a cellular level with chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue is a cell danger response. It's
Hmm.
totally protective. Your ATP is sending out danger signals instead of being used to create more ATP. So if you slowly kind of push it to the edge, but without going over, and then you slowly, slowly gain. So that's why the mind body work, sometimes we still need pacing as well.
Right.
But that being said, the way I describe my recovery is focusing on 4 areas. So this is what I teach in my coaching. So the first area is lifestyle and pacing. So I've described a little bit how important my lifestyle was. Definitely finding a place where I felt safe, and pacing
Okay.
is such a big piece for chronic fatigue because it's like incremental exposure and slowly showing your body it's safe. Number two, we call it in the CFS world brain retraining, but it's also just you can call it neuroplasticity, whatever you want, using your brain to help change your physical health because it is a physical illness. Number three is somatic body work. So this is instead of brain retraining as a top-down approach, somatic body work is a bottom-up approach. So literally using your body to find safety in your nervous system. And then the fourth area is self-discovery work. So this includes things like kinds of trauma work. You may not even need to call it trauma, but more deeper understanding of yourself, emotional expression. A lot of us who get these illnesses are quite repressed. I was the hugest people pleaser,
Right.
and this is very common with these illnesses. I found Dr. Sarno's work. I know that you're trained in Dr. Sarno's work. I found him and Nicole Sachs, who I've interviewed on my podcast, and I did her technique for 30 days straight, her anger journaling. And that is when my energy started to come back, truly. I had to get a lot out. I was really a lot more repressed than I realized. So there was a lot to that last piece. And also in that self-discovery work, it's like people who have sensitive nervous systems, I believe, should be doing what they love, and it can be beneficial to the world. And I know that's a bit of a privileged thing to say, but even if it's in your free time, finding a way to do what you love so that your nervous system has that calm to it. And for me, I started once I found my friends in CFS Health, my friend Stuart, we started our podcast, Post Viral Podcast. and we started talking about everything we were learning.
Right.
So I really recommend season one because there's a ton of advice, free advice in Post Viral Podcast, season one. And it's cool because you get to see from the start. I was maybe out of bed 4 hours a day at the start of our podcast. To the end, we went to Mexico together and we traveled and stuff at the end of season one. So you get to see the actual progression. So yeah, those are the four areas, but really they're all targeting the same idea of calming the nervous system, this
Mhm.
part of our brain, this deep part of our brain, the limbic brain. If this is your brain
Right.
here, this is your prefrontal cortex. We need to calm this part of your brain and the whole nervous system that it attaches to. And those four areas, I needed all four of them. I truly did.
Okay.
So for me, I mean, it was still a journey. It was still a few years until I got to where I am now, where I can do everything again. I'm running. I did a kettlebells class last night. That was really hard. Yeah, exercise is no longer a problem for me, and I don't have any pain. And my concussion symptoms, once in a while, I still do have dizziness. I haven't attempted a movie theater yet. That's kind of like the next level of, because motion sensitivity was so big for me. But I consider myself fully recovered. I can do pretty much anything that I did before.
Great. So if
Yeah.
I can touch on a couple of those
Yeah.
thoughts, lifestyle and pacing,
Hmm.
how do you know when you need to stop and not go too far? Because I get asked
Yeah.
that question a lot, and I'm like, it's kind of tough because, you want to be able to continue to expand your capacity, but
Hmm.
how much of it do you believe is the fear of
Mm.
going too much? Because a lot of the people that I work with that have fatigue and things like that, they're terrified of crashing. They're
Yeah.
terrified of doing too much. Therefore,
Yes.
they don't do anything or they do
Yeah.
very little. And there's a fear barrier that is likely keeping them down much more so than the actual capacity, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So they're just
Yeah.
so afraid. So how do you manage helping people find that do more, but not too much? And
Yeah.
I don't even like the phrase too much.
Yeah.
Too
Yeah.
much
I
says
agree.
there's a barrier.
Yeah,
I
I
did
agree. But
more.
this is the interesting thing is sometimes people with ME/CFS, they do brain retraining and they're like, "Oh, I'm totally fine," and then they go for a hike or something and they do crash because at a cellular level, your body is still telling you it doesn't feel safe. And that's why I do think incremental exposure is a good idea, but without fear. Like I say, I always say I'm I'm turning my clients into chill cocoa beans because you do have to be okay with a little bit of blowback. Like sometimes you will have symptoms, and you have to learn that that's okay if that happens.
Yeah,
It's all, as Miguel Batista put into the community the term adjustment periods. If
right,
we think of it as adjustment periods, when we are increasing a little bit, and so we take away that fear
right.
of the adjustment period, then we will be able to keep expanding. But going straight from a little bit to a lot,
Yeah, I
there
never
is a
advise
danger
that.
because we don't fear is such a layered thing. I'm sure you realize like people think they're not afraid, but it's so deep. It
Well,
can
it's
literally
subconscious.
be cellular.
It's subconscious. So tell me about,
Mm.
you're saying the cell danger response, but what
Mhm.
controls that? Because to me, I'm very much the brain controls everything.
Yeah.
The perception of danger is what controls it. So if the brain perceives you've done too much, it shuts down.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
brain activates the cell danger response. You're speaking more that this is like a real body issue and it's
It
a
is a real body
cellular
issue.
issue, but
Hmm.
I'm always of the mindset, I want your opinion here,
Hmm.
is the brain is controlling everything, including the cellular danger response.
Yeah. I agree with
And
you. I
so
agree
I
with
am
you.
very much geared towards let's give the brain information because I believe a lot of this mind body work is based on the brain perceiving danger incorrectly. So it's operating on misinformation, which creates fear.
Yeah.
it's the brain's working fine. The nervous system is working fine. I don't believe it's malfunctioning. It's just operating on misinformation and fear, which is causing it to send off a bunch of false alarms. Now,
Yeah.
we may differ on that because you're speaking about a cellular level
Yeah.
and
And
the
that's the difference
ATP
that
and
often the fatigue and the chronic pain, like there is a little bit something else going on with the fatigue because really truly people have tried these brain retraining programs like crazy and something external is happening. So like mold, for example, or a parasite or something else can trigger fear at a cellular level that's not just fear in the brain. I do agree with you that it's controlled by the brain, but it can be happening out of our control. Does that make sense?
well,
And
nothing.
I interviewed Ashok Gupta on we had a good discussion about this as well of like is it just the brain or is there two things going on? And Dr. Eleanor Stein, she's a very big proponent of the cell danger response and two things going on with chronic fatigue versus chronic pain, where it's a straight up brain to fear connection. Yeah, so I'm a little bit in between, but I do believe, like when I got back to that island, for example, after I had gotten so much better with brain retraining, there was no fear. I wasn't afraid, maybe
Not consciously,
subconsciously. Yeah,
not
subconsciously.
consciously.
But actually, I think there was a mold issue as well. And a lot of my clients find when they go back to an environment where there was mold, sometimes they crash. So I think there is something going on at a cellular level with fatigue because it's such a protective response of the body to shut down at a cellular level.
Right.
But I also agree that it's the brain. I don't know if that makes
I mean,
sense.
the brain controls all
Brain's
the
in
cellular
control.
activity,
Yeah, I
and the
agree.
cellular response wouldn't happen if the brain wasn't perceiving some type of danger. And,
Exactly.
hey, we're back in that place where we suffered the most,
Yeah,
where we were okay here, we were safe over there, but wow, we're back here. Oh no, we're
yeah.
back in danger. And again, I'm much more of a brain is controlling everything.
Yeah, it's
Um,
just good to know the cellular response for people with chronic fatigue because they get to understand what's happening at a cellular level. But I agree that all this brain stuff is so important. It's
yeah.
so important to healing.
So you said the second step was brain retraining,
Mhm.
neuroplasticity. What does that look like?
Looks like a lot of different things for different people, actually, because some people need a more strictness in their life in terms of practices and how they speak to themselves. Some people need less. A lot of perfectionists get these illnesses, and they actually need to kind of chill out about those things. But the
Right.
big thing is, as you probably know, through I've done level 1 and 2 of pain reprocessing therapy. The big three things that we want to start catching are worry, pressure, and self-criticism. Those are the big three that send that danger signal to your limbic brain, the part that's being overactive. So if we can start, and worry includes symptom focus, and
Sure.
pressure includes things like guilt and shame and self-criticism. We don't even realize we're doing it often. It's really crazy when you start to really analyze your thoughts. For me, it's big around food. I really catch myself. Oh, you're doing it again. You're eating those cookies. Oh, you dummy. It's really deeply ingrained in there. So
Yeah.
it's hard to change some of these things.
Yeah. And I agree with everything you just said, the worry, the pressure, the self-criticism, and under the umbrella of perceived danger being the driving force behind symptoms or not,
Hmm.
worry.
Hmm.
Actively creating fear with our thinking, subconsciously interpreting a house that you felt ill in. Those are creating the fears, pressure. I got to get better by next month because I got a big trip or I'm going to a wedding,
Yeah.
or pressure, self-criticism. I'm not doing it right. I still have symptoms. I must be messing this up. Maybe I can't do it. Pressure, criticism, judgment. And all of those fall underneath the guise of perceived danger. The brain's
Yeah.
just interpreting all of that to go, we're still in trouble. Stay activated, stay hyper vigilant.
Yeah.
So,
And I feel like I was privileged in my recovery in a lot of ways. I didn't have a lot of girls around my age feel this like, oh, I want to have babies soon, so I need to get better. I didn't have that feeling. I feel grateful for that. I have, people with kids who need to get better for their kids or older individuals who need to get better because they don't have much time left. There's
Sure.
always a pressure we can find to put on ourselves. So it's really important to address that.
So I want to move on to the third step, which is the
Yeah.
somatic body work. Now,
Yeah.
I am very much the cognitive top-down guy. Like
Yeah.
I'll acknowledge that. I'm not, I mean, I do in the beginning of all my videos, I remind people let's soften the body, drop the shoulders so we can breathe comfortably. But I'm
Hmm.
not a breathwork meditation somatic practice guy. I don't
Hmm.
teach that primarily because I didn't need that to overcome my symptoms.
Hmm.
So in my view, they must not be required elements.
Yeah, no,
They may
some
be
people really need it.
beneficial. They may
Hmm.
be beneficial, but they may not be required. At least it wasn't for me. And I have a lot of people getting better with my more of a top-down approach, even though I mix in the whole relax your body so that you can breathe, which conveys a message directly to the subconscious that you're safe. But talk to me about what you think is a beneficial bottom-up approach. If you
Yeah.
want to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's great. It worked for you and it can work for a lot of people, but because a lot of us live so much in our head, especially individuals with a lot of anxieties, by coming into your body and finding a feeling of safety within your body, you can actually find a lot of healing throughout the nervous system. And I can actually feel the switch in my body from fight or flight into rest and digest. I can do simple activities. For example, I'll give you one right now. So, this is a Feldenkrais technique. Dr. Feldenkrais was an Australian doctor, came up with these techniques. Irene Lyons uses his work a lot in
Okay.
her program. So, Feldenkrais technique is slow movement therapy. So this is called octopus hands. So you're just slowly moving your hands like an octopus consciously. You can think about the bones in your hands as you do it, doubles the effect. I do it sometimes in the morning when I'm petting my dog. She doesn't know I'm getting something out of it too.
Right.
And I just felt that release in my tailbone. It's just like an instant signal to the body that, oh, she must be safe. If she can move slowly and consciously, she must be safe. So throughout my day, I'm consciously bringing my attention back to my body and reminding myself that I'm safe because it keeps me out of going into that hypervigilant or
Thinking
stress
loops.
state. Yeah.
Okay.
So I find it really important. You can do it under your desk in a meeting or in bed. That's just one activity that I found really, really helps me stay in my body and takes me out when I start to notice my brain's going a little overdrive. So that's an
Okay.
example. Some people get a lot of benefit from vagus nerve activities. So if you heard of the vagus nerve, it's a nerve that goes through our whole body and we can actually strengthen it through certain activities. So maybe you've heard of like cold water exposure. Some people do the intense jumping into water and stuff. That's not what I ever was able to do because like it sucks, but some people enjoy
And
it.
not in Vancouver either, because the water's really cold.
Really cold. I literally tried. I was like, I'm gonna jump in the ocean every day in the winter, but it's just unpleasant. Why would you do an unpleasant one when you can like hum instead? That's also a vagus nerve strengthening activity is humming. So there was just certain activities like that I did every morning. Consistency is key. I did a few activities every morning, and before bed as well. Mix of like kind of brain retraining and somatic activities that I feel like really contributed to me healing. And then with
Okay.
pacing up, yeah, I haven't had a problem since. And then, yeah, let's talk about the last one too, because I'm excited about that
Yeah,
one.
like self-discovery. I never got that much benefit out of journaling.
Mm,
It was not a healing activity for me because I think part of it was the intention behind it. I
hmm.
would journal and I'd say, is this working? Nope, I still hurt. So I'm
Right.
not working for me. And I found personally, I kept on journaling about, my past, my present, personality,
Yeah,
Nicole's
you did
approach.
yeah, Nicole Sachs.
Um, I didn't do I wasn't aware of her back then,
Oh, okay.
but I was more Sarno-esque, and I was like, I was focusing on all the things that were wrong with my life or wrong with
Hmm.
me. And after 6 months of journaling about everything that was wrong, I got pretty darn depressed. I
Mm,
finally had to say, screw this and
mm,
stop journaling because I never found that early childhood trauma that was the key that said, oof, you're better.
mm.
I kept looking for it.
Yeah.
And
I
and
know
I
that
would,
feeling of like, there must be something. Yeah.
right. And so the belief that there's something screwed up from my past that I have to find, and as
Mm,
long as I have symptoms, I'm missing something, so I got to keep looking. That whole thing keeps you in this fear loop of why aren't I getting better? I'm doing the work, right? And so I finally had to put down the pen and paper and just recognize that if it was there, I would have gotten it out already. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I got to the point where I was journaling about the same stuff over and over again, and I was just focusing on all the negatives, which was causing them to grow. And
Yeah.
my feeling about myself and life was getting worse. And so I just found that wasn't the solution for me.
Yeah.
Put it
No, it
down.
wasn't for you. Absolutely. And that's why I truly believe in that there's such an individual approach is needed for
Right.
recovery. I get a lot of clients who have neurodivergence or LGBTQ, a lot of people with a lot of trauma in their background as well. And for some of these people, it's a very key piece because
So
at
give
a
me ideas
subconscious level, sorry.
besides journaling, what other things fall in
Oh,
that
I'm a huge
self-discovery?
fan of IFS, internal family systems, which is Dr. Richard Schwartz. I truly believe he's a genius. I don't use that term lightly. The amount of benefit my clients have found from studying internal family systems, and I often send them off to internal family systems therapists. I'm not a therapist. I
Right.
don't do deep trauma work with clients. I'm not qualified for that, but I'm the one who brings them the approach, explains how
Right.
it works, and then I can send them off to someone else. Or if they don't have intense trauma, they can do it on their own, like I did.
Yeah. I
Um,
just got a book, No Bad Parts.
yeah, it's genius.
And
Have you
I
read it?
literally just got it. I haven't read it yet.
Oh,
It just
I'm
showed up
excited for
a
you.
day or two ago. So I want to explore that and see what
Hmm.
it's all about.
Yeah, it's really important to a lot of my clients' recovery. And yeah, like I said, I think it's just really different for different people. For me, the journaling was a huge piece of my recovery. As someone who had a very narcissistic mother growing up, and I never learned how to express my anger. I literally didn't even know I had anger in me until I started writing and it came flooding out.
Sure.
And it really, this should, and what you're describing, it didn't happen for you. It should be cathartic. It should feel like a kid having a tantrum, honestly. Like they even have done studies. There's a really great Huberman Lab podcast episode about the scientific studies on the journaling and how effective it is. It it really, the more you express, the higher level of healing is found in individuals. They found this with HIV/AIDS. They found it with asthma, sleep disorders, rheumatoid arthritis. These methods can really, really help people with chronic illnesses if they have repressed emotions. Because what's happening, this is what Dr. Huberman is theorizing. It's a really interesting episode. Is what's happening is when we have these traumas, a lot of energy gets concentrated around the
Mhm.
limbic brain. And by releasing it and expressing it in different ways, letting yourself out, it's transferring the energy back to our prefrontal cortex, where we can rationalize, where we interpret. That's where our more advanced, evolved thinking patterns are. So it's kind of taking the energy away from this part of our brain and putting it back to where it's not as dangerous to the nervous system. So it's a really cool theory. Maybe you can link to that episode of his podcast. It's so interesting.
Any idea what keywords I should be looking for when I try to find
Yeah,
them?
yeah. I mean, I could send it to you, but it's Dr. Huberman. If you Google Huberman
Right.
Lab and journaling, you'll find it.
Okay.
Hmm.
That
Yeah, so it really is important for a lot of people. I totally recognize it wasn't necessary for you, and a
I
lot of
do
people
I
don't
do
need it.
think I had a certain amount of outpouring, the
Hmm.
cathartic that you talked about.
Hmm.
but I was always doing it to get a result.
Right.
Did my pain go away? No, it didn't. I'm doing it wrong.
Right.
Damn it. Right. And so there was always that outcome dependence. And
Yes.
I'll admit, I did meditation for a while, never got the result because I was always looking for the result.
Yeah.
The breath work,
Exactly.
always looking for the result. And when I didn't get the result, it just added more pressure and judgment, and I'm doing it wrong and I'm missing something. And I looped on that stuff for a lot of years.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah, if you
I
have
think,
more of a goal of just to better understand yourself and better make yourself a fuller person in the end, that's
right.
actually a better way to look at it. And like Dr. Katz Primal Trust, the whole idea of her program is just like trust that we're okay at a deep level. We just
Mhm.
have to work on all this stuff and we'll be okay. So it's kind of like changing the goal from healing to like being your true self. Hmm.
So I think where you and I may differ is I do start with that primal, not primal, the core, I'm okay already.
Hmm.
I just have to make sure my brain knows that.
Hmm.
And once the brain knows, I'm giving a thumbs up here. Once the
No.
brain knows that I'm actually okay, there's nothing to fix,
Hmm.
the brain takes care of the rest.
Yeah.
So I really focus on safety, and that starts from the core belief that I'm not messed up in the first place. And my
Yeah.
brain and my nervous system is working flawlessly. It's just operating at a very high intensity because I've got a lot of misinformation that I'm sick, I'm broken, I can do too much, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, blah, 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 and all those things that fuel this whole cycle.
Yeah.
But I think once we teach the brain that I'm actually okay, the brain takes care of all this stuff,
Hmm. Yeah, I
regulates
just think when
everything.
you live in a culture like we do, like there's a lot of triggers for a lot of people
Mhm.
that are so subconscious because they've been there since before memories even. And that's an interesting thing that happened with one of my clients with the IFS. She found that like traumas from when she was two was causing her anxiety. And by recognizing that and finding that out through IFS work, she's been able to heal. So it's
Right.
really interesting what can come from that kind of work.
Really cool.
Yeah, I think so.
So, what would you say is, I mean, I know you've mapped out all this stuff and these are things you learned on your healing journey. Was there any one thing that was the light bulb moment for you?
Mm. I think there's a few, but one key piece was definitely this understanding of my value, which again is in the self-discovery piece. I think a lot of us who get these illnesses are either achievers, perfectionists, or as Dr. Sarno, goodists. I'm definitely a goodist. I
Yeah.
should be volunteering. I should be helping people.
Right.
That should. This idea that my value is not in what I do, but just who I am as a person. And switching that value kind of lets you just relax a little bit. Because literally, I could be in bed all day and I'm just as valuable as if I'm out doing this and this and this. If you can
Right.
come to that conclusion, it just takes this weight off, this pressure off, right? So that was a big one for me, switching my value to just being me and who I am versus what I do. I think that was a big one. Um, yeah, I think there's just so many of them. The importance of community absolutely was a huge one, as I said, and asking for help. You know, it's very hard for a lot of us to ask for help.
Yeah.
That was really big for me. I always look at the three areas that Dr. Gabor Mate points out as being key for chronic illness in general, which are emotional repression, people pleasing, that was big for me, and perfectionism. Those are the three common characteristics he sees with people with all kinds of chronic illnesses. So, addressing those three areas of emotional repression, people pleasing, I think it's a bit more. It's more, as we found more in, like, there's more categories than that, but those are the commonalities in his book, When the Body Says No, that he points out as being very common. And it's how you know, after I read that book, I was like, okay, this is a mind body illness. I get it because I am these three things.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Um, so how long you been feeling great?
I mean, Feeling great. That's a good question. I guess like it's still been a gradual thing because I still reach new levels where I'll try like I did a Pilates class that was like on the machine a few months ago, and I felt pretty rough the next day. I'm not gonna lie.
But that's
Like, and it's a
physical
different rough.
exercise. We're
No, no,
supposed
no,
to
I know.
feel,
This is what I'm saying. It's a
yeah,
different rough. It's a different rough. Like the brain fog where I couldn't think very
okay,
well and that extreme fatigue. People who have chronic fatigue get the difference between,
okay.
but it is true. You just have to get used to that new level, just like with exercise. Your body has to get used to that. If I did that Pilates class 3 more times, that would be my new normal. So this is what I mean with pacing is I still reach levels of newness, but yeah, especially the last year and a half, I've been fully living my life for
So the
sure.
one thing that I will suggest is that even though you hit that level with Pilates and you felt pretty rough the next day, it's my belief that we're not recovering from symptoms.
Hmm.
We're recovering from fear. So when that
Right.
happened with Pilates, it doesn't sound like you fell into fear and panic and oh no. You knew
No.
exactly what it was, you knew exactly how to respond.
Hmm.
In my view, you are a success story because you've recovered from the fear
Hmm.
because you said, interesting, a mind body experience just happened with Pilates, got some old symptom brain fog back, but I know what it is. And I know
Hmm.
the panic, and you recovered from fear. So to me, that's the beautiful part of this. When you recover from the fear, you can see this stuff a mile away and go, I know what that is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. One thing I will say is that different hormonal changes can impact this stuff as well. I have a lot of clients who are entering menopause and end up having big crashes again or stuff. So again, other factors can be at play, but yes, I do believe in the healing for all of them. Hmm.
So let's talk about that because
Hmm.
that concept or that topic comes up fairly regularly.
Hmm.
My audience and your audience is probably in the same age ranges, and people in
Hmm.
their 50s, they're hitting menopause. I think there's a certain amount of conditioning and
Oh,
expectation
there is. Yeah.
that influence dramatically whether or not somebody has a pretty smooth ride through menopause or a wild and woolly one. Well, my
Yeah, and
mom
studies have
suffered and my
shown.
aunt suffered
Yeah.
and this suffered, and I think it's genetic. And so they go into menopause with this huge amount of fear and worry, which teaches the brain to be that much more sensitive to and
Hmm.
responsive to or reactive to normal hormonal changes.
Yeah, and I agree. There was actually the most recent episode of Science Versus talks about the science on this, and there is some studies that show that CBT or mind body work does decrease symptoms just as much as doing different drug
Right.
treatments. But the initial switch, in terms of we know the scientifically that your hormones levels do change.
Oh, for sure.
So sometimes maybe at a subconscious level maybe it's a fear at a subconscious level, but sometimes there can be a reaction. But I agree you can get out of it. Absolutely. Or the
I
reaction to it
agree
is
with that too. And I
free.
think the reaction also has to do with the state of the person that's going into
Hmm. Yeah, I
hormonal
feel a lot of
changes.
stress in your
Because we
life.
have we have a lot of people who are terrified of their monthly cycle
Hmm.
because a
Yeah.
couple of instances, whatever symptoms they had flared up during their cycle. So now they've said that's the cause. And every month they hit that cycle of fear, panic, flare, come down. And, I've seen
Yeah, and it was like that for me. It was like 3 weeks of the month. It was my symptoms were extra bad. But as I got better in general, working on the 4 areas, everything got better. So
yeah, but
yeah.
I think there's an anticipatory once you link symptoms to something that happens regularly, um, you're anticipating it. And people's
Mm.
symptoms flare well before the cycle hits, and then they last well after the cycle's done. And so, in my view, the perception of danger surrounding these monthly hormonal changes, menopausal hormonal changes, and again, I'm a guy talking about this. So, for anybody listening who goes, what does this guy know? I acknowledge that. But I've also worked with enough people that
The brain is very powerful. I
I think
100%
the
agree
fear
with that.
aspect, the brain perceiving danger, again, some people coast through menopause, other people really, really struggle. And if you ask them their stories, were you what did you think about menopause? And they have experiences in their life about this person, that person, that person. My girlfriend went through it first and she had a wicked time. And it
Hmm.
creates this whole anticipatory fear, which turns up the brain's volume on the sensitivities to those hormonal changes. And then it's like, oh, we're feeling some differences,
Hmm.
legitimate changes. But then the brain goes, holy crap, here we go. I hope I'm not as bad as what they experienced. And it just, so I think safety at the brain level is huge. And what we're discovering in this conversation is there's many ways to get there.
Hmm.
And I love the
Yes.
various different ways. And this is some information that my audience doesn't usually get
Hmm.
because I'm more of a top-down guy. So that's why I was asking those questions and trying to get some ideas for the bottom up. So for anybody
Yeah.
in my audience who wants to do more of a bottom-up approach, you know, try the octopus hands, try
Yeah.
the humming.
Mhm.
Um, if you're looking to do more self-discovery, perhaps look up some parts work, IFS. Uh,
Hmm.
when I mentioned the book, No Bad Parts, you seem to be like, oh yeah, that one.
Love it.
Apparently, it's very well regarded. I haven't read it yet,
Yes.
but for anybody looking to explore the various parts, would you recommend that book?
100%. Yeah.
No Bad Parts. I think it is Richard Schwartz, right?
Dr. Richard Schwartz. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so this has been great. Do you have anything you'd like to add for anybody listening or watching?
No, I think that's it. In terms of that, in terms of like people who feel very gaslit about their issues, I do want to say that there is some exciting changes happening in the medical system, at least here in Canada.
Mhm.
Um, I'm teaching within the medical system, like 60 patients at a time over Zoom, which is so exciting, but it's all covered here. So like things are changing. And as we know from long COVID, one good thing about it all is the awareness, as people understand more that this is real. So I know a lot of people out there feel very gaslit, and I just want to give them a little bit of hope that things are getting better. And you found Dan, so
Right.
you're on the right path now.
So you just made a comment about long COVID and these things are real.
Hmm.
It's my perception, and I just went to the PPD Association workshop, which was down in Boulder, which was like
Mm.
the leading mind body people. Nicole
Hmm.
Sachs, Dr. Schubner, Dr. Clark,
Mm. Yeah.
that whole group of people. And it was stated pretty emphatically from the stage that long COVID is mind body.
Hmm.
It's not a viral thing.
It's still real though. People are
Oh, it's
experiencing
real.
real
I
illness.
just want to clarify for the audience because when people hear long COVID and then within the next 8 words, it's real, they're like, what? Ah. So I really
Yeah.
want to be clear
A
that,
lot of my clients end up finding that deep down there is a parasite issue. There was Lyme. There is something that triggered your nervous system to become oversensitive. But the issue, like you said, is the oversensitivity. Yeah.
okay. So I think that statement just scared the crap out of people going, do I have parasites? Do I have Lyme?
No, no. See, this is the thing. That's why even if you do, we all do. We all have these things in us. EBV, I was tested highly positive for EBV and
Right.
CMV and all those things, but the same things work. This is the interesting thing, is we all have a lot of stuff going on inside of us. If you look, you'll find stuff.
Right.
This is why people go to like functional medicine doctors. They get a lot of test results that are positive, but doesn't mean anything different helps.
Yeah. So in my view, when we have a brain that feels safe, the whole system operates better,
It calms down. Yeah.
can calm down the immune system, the digestive system, SIBO, candida, those things are more the result of a suppressed digestion system than the original cause of problems.
Mhm.
So I think with a brain that is not in the stress response chronically,
Right.
the whole system works better, immune system.
Agreed. But
So
I did have SIBO. I did have Candida, right? So
I
they're real
understand.
problems, but I agree that
But
the
did
end
you fix it
result,
with
my
supplementation and
body.
probiotics, or did you fix it with the mind-body approach?
Exactly. Yeah, mind
That's what I
body.
wanted to get to.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So many people are just test to test to test, investigation, investigation. Oh no, I'm broken, 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 broken.
Hmm.
Don't realize that creating that safety and trusting the body, it knows what to do.
Hmm.
And we teach the brain we're safe, the whole nervous system and autonomic systems return to balance. And these things showing up on the tests are inconsequential because the body already knows how to deal with that stuff. It just doesn't do it well when you're in the chronic state of fight or flight and the whole system is jacked up.
Yeah.
So I think that's the message I would like to leave people with
Yeah.
is trust the body, teach the brain, let the brain resolve things. But if you're running around with lab results in your hand screaming, fix me, that's probably not the approach that I would recommend. And I don't think Lindsay's recommending it either.
No.
What else? Anything else to add?
No, I think that's it. That's good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I've gotten some new insights, so I appreciate
Good.
the bottom up stuff and the work you've done.
Yeah, sure.
So, Lindsay is a coach, and
Hmm.
so I'm going to get from her links, website, or social media, and I will
Yeah.
include that in the description of the video below. I'll share this on Facebook and YouTube, so the description will have the links if you would like to talk to Lindsay. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
I
Dan. It was so
I
nice
appreciate
talking to you.
you. Yeah, you go
Yeah.
under the name the CFS coach.
Yeah. The CFS coach is my Instagram name, and my website is lindsayvine.com is my website.
Cool. But we'll get the links. We'll put it in the description. So unless you've got anything else, we'll wrap this up.
No, that's it. Nice to meet you, Dan.
All right, Lindsay, I appreciate you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. You too.
All right, take
Bye.
care.